Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. We may as well get started. This morning, we start off with the Planning and Development Committee, and I will go to Director Knodel to chair that one. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Pendergraft. Looking for a motion to accept the minutes or the agenda for the Thursday, April 4th, 2024 Planning and Development Committee meeting. Moved, Mr. Director Miller, seconded Director Pendergraft. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we will move on to the first item. Vacation rental project scope, CAO's
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to seek direction in relation to the scope of the pending vacation rental review. Administrative recommendation is that the proposed deliverables and engagement as outlined in the administrative report entitled Vacation Rental Review Project Scope dated April 4th, 2024 be considered appropriate for the Vacation Rental Review Project. Staff is here with a presentation and you can ask questions as required.
Thank you. Mr. Garish, please.
Sure, we'll just wait for the PowerPoint to get up and I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Kent to do the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's the other PowerPoint there, Danny. Okay, so we've brought this item back to Planning and Development Committee in response to our last committee meeting back in October. And just in light of some of the changes that have occurred, we wanted to really hammer out the scope of this vacation rental review project with the board before issuing an RFP to bring in a consultant. So just as a background, brief project timeline, this project was in its earliest form initiated back in July 2021 at a request from the Area D APC. And as you can see, we progressed through, it slowly made it onto the business plan and was included as a strategic priority in 2023. An RFP was issued last summer, but pending the completion of other projects, this project was delayed from last August up until now. And just as a bit of a reminder, I included this slide from the October 5th committee meeting. We just included this as examples of some of the concerns that you were circulating at the time, notification sign being vandalized in Area E, and a petition against vacation rentals that was started in Area H. And of course, in the interim, there has been a number of legislative changes. So the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, as you're all aware, received royal assent end of October. And at its last board meeting, the board did resolve to submit a request for areas D, F, and I to opt in to the principal residence requirement. And so because of the length of time that has lapsed, the number of legislative changes, and the length of time and the amount of resources that were recently required for the opt-in decision, we'd really like to narrow down the scope of this project, as I said before, we issue the RFP. And so what we're really looking for is input on the project deliverables and the amount of engagement that the board wants to see with the public and with the board itself. And so before I get into this, really, these are just options that staff came up with, and we are looking for direction from the board. This is just one list of options that could be included in the RFP, but it really is open-ended. So for the project deliverables, what staff had in mind was that a consultant would be brought in to produce a vacation rental review report. which would include background research, amongst other things, study of benefits and impact to residential market, impacts on neighborhoods, impacts to traditional accommodation providers, and impacts or benefits to the local economy. And I just included this image here on the side as a recent local example. City of Penticton did something that we see as somewhat similar to what we had in mind. The other component of the vacation rental review report that we thought could be included were some regulatory options. And I included this image on the side here. It's the policy manual for short-term rentals that was produced in response to the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act. And I just wanted to highlight for the board that the opt-in decision was one component of a number of legislative changes that were introduced. And this policy manual does include a number of different options that staff sees. There may be some benefit in bringing in a consultant to provide more detailed options with respect to each of those regulatory options. That could include permitting, whether we want to continue with the temporary use permit or shift towards zoning, what business licensing could look like, what enforcement options are available. The new legislation did introduce increased fines that could be available, and what health and safety considerations the board wishes to be reviewed for vacation rental uses going forward. On the engagement side, really, we view this as a fairly standard level of engagement for a project of this size. So one component would include public notification via the standard channels for a regional district project. That would include information releases on social media, voyant alert notification, notices to affected property owners, and a variety of documents and information posted to the regional district's webpage. On the engagement side of things, some options that could be available to the board would be to have the consultant conduct a workshop with the board. We had in mind that perhaps 2 public information meetings might be beneficial. One could be here in Penticton in person, and another could be held online via WebEx. Of course, referrals would be sent to external agencies, and an option that could be included is an online community survey. And as the alternative, as I said, the options are fairly open-ended. The project scope could be amended by adding or removing any of the deliverables or engagement components included on the previous slides, although we would like to flag that there will be likely added cost if additional workshops or public meetings are required. And just as a general estimate based on similar recent projects, the cost to bring in a consultant for a half day, we would estimate to be approximately $5,000 per session. Further to the alternative recommendation, we're not recommending the use of committees. However, this option is available to the board, and if the use of committees is desired, it could take a variety of formats that could include the existing electoral area APCs, a group formed from the APC chairs, and it could include a citizen advisory group appointed by the board. And with that, I'll turn it over to the board. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sir, we just need to wait for my full screen to come back, and thank you for an interesting presentation. Any questions for our panel here? Director Weed, please.
Something that I believe I was just made aware of, it sounds like there's some changes coming, some new changes or recent changes to the vacation rentals that might deal with some of this issue. And I don't understand the full complexity of it, but something in regards to if these short-term rentals work with, or Airbnbs work with tour companies or rental companies, that there's some way to potentially skirt some of the stuff we're trying to do. And I'm wondering if there's still ongoing changes to the legislation that might affect what we're trying to do right now that we can't adjust for yet because it still seems to be changing. So is that something that I'm misinformed about, or just I don't understand the complexities of it? Thank you.
Either of the delegates have an answer here?
No, we're not aware of that per se with the tour companies. I know the province has issued clarification in relation to strata hotels and how those are to be viewed. But I suppose the benefit for us at the moment is that, we're just at the very start of this project. So if there are these announcements coming, hopefully it's soon, and we can take that into account when we bring options forward later on in the year for the board to consider.
Director Monteith, please.
Through the chair, in the board report, it mentioned something about Twin Lakes. Could that be clarified, please?
Mr. Garish, please.
I'm going to have to apologize. I don't have a copy of the report, so yeah, I'm not sure what the exact reference was, but I'm assuming it's in relation to the existing zoning at Twin Lakes, the village core area where we do have vacation rentals listed as a permitted use. But beyond that, I mean, again, as part of this project, basically everything is up for discussion with the board and how you want to deal with those situations such as Apex and Twin Lakes where there is existing zoning, and going forward, is that retained or is that changed?
Does that answer your question, Director Monteith? No. Director Miller and then Director Coyne Jr.
Thank you, Chair. Am I allowed to offer an opinion at this time, or is this strictly for questions?
I believe you can offer opinion. It's yours to give, sir.
Okay, I don't think this is necessary at all. This has been so researched. As the presenter said, the city of Penticton did similar study for about $50,000. I'm sure they'd be glad to share the report with you. And as I said, Summerland and Oliver obviously did some extensive research when they decided to go into it, and $5,000 an hour, I think could be better spent. This is something that everybody is knowledgeable about. And it's one thing that everybody in all the communities has an opinion about. It's something like if you stopped a person on the street and asked them about vacation rentals, they wouldn't give you a blank look. And I believe that the public's made it known. And I just think there's other things that we can move on to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Coyne Jr., then Director Coyne Sr., and then Director Roberts.
Thank you. I guess a question to Chris would be, with the Twin Lakes, because that's an opt-in area now, does the zoning doesn't matter, right? Like it's now not allowed with. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, so I'm going to qualify my statements, like I think I have many times before, that we haven't really jumped or dived into the vacation rental review yet. So my understanding of all the nuances with the legislation is still being firmed up. But with the opt-in request, which is only a request at this moment, right? The minister hasn't granted that. But if they do, then yeah, the ability to have a zoning at Twin Lakes that allows for all types of property owners to rent vacation rentals is kind of rendered non-operative, right? So potential, but what we would have to do in terms of other changes to reflect that, I'm not sure at this point. I mean, again, that's what we're hoping the review can help inform us with. So.
Thank you, Mr. Garish. Director Coyne Sr., please.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you very much. So in the deliverables, I think we can trim that down somewhat, in that, as Director Miller stated, the city of Penticton did an exercise in this quite recently, which we have all been given at that presentation. So like the benefits and impacts on residential rental market, I don't think that's relevant anymore. The benefit impacts on neighborhoods, that's going to have to be done neighborhood by neighborhood by the area directors, because it is so different out here. Like for me, from Tulameen to Missoula is one end of the spectrum to the other. So I don't know how a outside party could fairly referee that match, because it's going to be something that the whole board shouldn't have to pay for. Benefits to the local economy definitely is something that we have absolutely no real idea what those benefits are in financially, because we don't know yet how many vacation rentals we actually have in each area. It is the driver in part of Area H in Tulameen, for example. There's probably hundreds of them out in that area that contribute to the whole economy of the whole area, not just the village of Tulameen. So it's something that I think very strongly about this, that we have to proceed with this so that we have a real understanding. Right now, we're all sitting here, well, geez, how many are in my neighborhood? How many are in your neighborhood? We don't know those answers until we do this, till we do a study on it. And then we need to go out to all of our local communities and make sure that they're okay with it. And I don't believe that's something that, excuse me, that we should be trying to hand off onto a consultant. I think the area directors are probably going to have to step up on a lot of that. And I just did one on Saturday at Osprey Lake with the Hayes Creek Fire Department, and people out there were actually very excited about the thought of having a business license and then be able to control where they go to a certain point. So those are all things that we really need to get out of our community members. I don't think that a consultant can answer those questions, but we need to have a consultant come and at least let us know how many are in the area and what the financials are that go with that. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Roberts, Rodrigo, and then Taylor.
Thank you to the chair. First off, Director Coyne Sr. kind of stole a lot of my thunder. That, a lot of things are looking, especially in regards to the Similkameen, and so much of our area is all agricultural land in regards to the opt-in, opt-out doesn't really connect with that. The diversity of our small hamlets and communities, it definitely needs to be more of a one-off. And I think, we have a greater understanding in regards to our specific areas, and to have, a greater finger on the pulse in regards to how many we have. I don't believe we have as many down our end of the valley, of course, like a Tulameen. But of course, with agritourism and the ability to have a lot of these types of things on ag land up to 10 units, we have quite a few of those down here. My other question would be whether or not you split, not looking at this negatively, but you have the RGS in regards to the Okanagan itself, and it's almost like standalone comparatively to the Similkameen. Whether or not we could look at the two sides differently, just because we are such a different animal in regards to vacation rentals, the access in regards to certain legislation that does or does not really affect our communities as much. And so, yeah, I just following up on regards to Director Coyne's statements. And then finally, I just got a question, because I've been thinking about it a little bit, and it's in Area I with the opt-in, and when we talk about Area Apex being out, is that Apex the resort? But what about all the private, all the cabins and all that around the actual resort? They would then be not doing rentals, I'm assuming. So if that's correct, so that'd be my question. Thank you.
Mr. Garrish, please.
So I think at a staff level, and we're happy to clarify this, but our approach to Apex is we're looking at the exemption to applying to the whole of the Apex area, not just the resort. I'm not even sure where we would draw the line around the resort, but my understanding of the resort is generally it's the former hotel. But beyond that is all the residential development. And so I can't imagine that the exemption would only apply to the former hotel. That really what we're talking about is the broader Apex community as being exempt from the requirements. So that's how we're looking at it.
Thank you, sir. Director Federico, please.
Thank you to the chair. To address Director Weeb, so page 9 of the short-term rental policy guide that the ministry put out. So one of the exempted uses is called outdoor recreational activity. So context of exempt lodging, where activities are organized through the operator of an overnight commercial accommodation or which are carried out with a guide. So under like hunting, fishing, kayaking, canoeing, and they list all the activities. So that is there already as an exempt option. In terms of the vacation rental review, I think it's going to be significant piece to be looking at is under the regulatory options that staff have brought forward. So our permitting, our business licensing, enforcement, zoning, increased fines, those things. That's going to be significant for the areas that didn't opt in. And there needs to be an incredible amount of reform and look on that side. So that's where I would like to see time and effort put into this review.
Thank you, Director Federico. Director Taylor, please.
Thank you. Comments. I think this study was requested 2.5 years ago, and it was, the objectives at that point made sense. Time's moved on. Some of the decisions have already been made. We've already done a survey. I saw a reference to doing a survey. We've already done one. I mean, we did it in 2023. Why would we do another? Range of communities from Okanagan Falls through Naramata to Willowbrook down to Plain Farms and the side of the Anarchist. So I'm not sure if a consultant is going to really narrow down and differentiate between those different areas for us. And if he did, I don't know that it would be statistically valid in any event. And so I guess I'm wondering what that consultant really would be able to do. Assessment of number of STRs, I really believe that is very useful. Doesn't seem to me to be difficult. If we had an ally at Travel Penticton who had an account on AirDNA, we'd have access to that information. And they've given it to several of us directors independently, and I don't see that that's difficult to get. There might be better numbers out there somewhere, but I haven't heard of where they are, and most times I think people have referenced AirDNA as a place to go for an assessment of what's out there on all the different platforms. If I look at the first 3 objectives, I don't really see value here. If I look at the benefits to traditional accommodation providers, I think that was one of the reasons we, in Area D, asked for this study 2.5 years ago, because they were viewed to be, and again, this is subjective, but viewed to be unfair competition for those traditional providers. And those traditional providers have now left the market. So there isn't any, very little traditional provider now. In terms of the benefits to the local economy, if we're going to even consider that, I think we have to also look at negative tax implication as well. So what's the cost of these things? If we've got 50 beds being provided through STRs, as opposed to 50 beds being provided through a traditional accommodation with commercial tax, what's it really costing the community to go this route? And so my last comment would be that I would like to see us focus on options looking forward. If some people who have stayed out want to see better, or a different way of applying the RDOS approach, great, but also the RDOS approach now includes opt-in. That's part of our approach, and I think we need to figure out how we're going to do that. So I would be focused on the regulatory approach side of things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Holmes, please.
With this new provincial registry, will have access to who's all the different people are using those platforms, because those platforms are going to have to give all their details to the province. Isn't that correct? Even if you're, regardless of whether you're opt-in or out. So I don't really see any need in spending money to find that information, because the province will be collecting it for us, unless I'm not understanding that correctly.
Mr. Garish?
So our understanding at a staff level is that the new Short-Term Accommodation Act does apply to listings. And so in theory, any operators that are listing on those platforms would be subject to those provincial licensing requirements, and that information would be available.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Just to follow up then, so soon enough, we'll have all that information on all the operators in our communities. We'll know that.
Thank you, sir. Director Gilbert, please.
Yeah, thanks for the chair. I think Director Holmes definitely, that was the question I was going to ask. And I think at this point, I'd feel more comfortable focusing on what kind of playing field that we are going to give the short-term rentals compared to what's the playing field for accommodations inside the RDOS. Like for example, like we have business license. You can look at our business licensing at the city of Penticton and what's required by it, and it's to create that level playing field between short-term rentals and the traditional accommodation providers.
Thank you, sir. Director Gettins, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I think what staff need from us is some clear direction on where to go. And I think part of the problem is that we've got 3 different audiences. So we have 2 areas that need to do a little bit more exploration and figure out some nuances for their areas. Then we've got the opted out crew where I feel like it's a little bit more of a wait and see because it's not a pressing issue in your area and see how things go. And then we've got the group that have opted in. I'm with the majority of the group. I don't think there's a lot of study needed. I think there's a lot of study. We kind of know the situation. That's why the province has put this forward. So I think for me, what I would like to know is how we are going to move forward. We hear from staff pretty much every time we ask a question, they are telling us they haven't had time to research this enough. So my question to staff is, do you need somebody on a contract to come and support your work while you're doing this? Because we don't really know the outcome either. We're all just sort of learning this together and waiting for the provinces who might introduce new change. So do we need an extra staff person to help manage this project internally so we can get some answers? I do agree, just before you answer that, I do agree with Director Coyne Sr. that if you want a more made in H approach or a made in E approach, that's something that you need to look at managing and paying for from your residents. I think that's a fair approach. I think the opted in folk were pretty closely tied. We can probably get some work going on that. And the opted out, I'm not sure exactly what you're doing, but I guess that's my question is, are you looking for more support from the day-to-day to help manage this? Because it doesn't sound like you've had enough time to look at it and really give us any clear direction. And that's kind of where we're struggling.
Thank you, Director Gettins. I think the human resources portion, but I might have to direct towards CEO Zaffino.
Thank you. What we're planning is, at a staff level is a license workshop, which will start, I think, the process. Each one of the U9, we're going to have to make separate decisions. Do you want business licenses? You have to have it for short-term rental. What the costs are, what are the consequences? I would start off by, first of all, relying on the province to see if we can use their information. And the next step would be moving forward if we can't rely on them. But there will be a workshop coming up.
Okay, so just then, as a follow-up, I think what the board has to decide is, are we going to move forward with the project as it is right now, or are we willing to drop that and start a different project with the new information? I feel like we're not, all I'm saying is I don't feel like we're giving direction to staff here that will be helpful in a request for a proposal.
Thank you. I've got Director Bloomfield and then Director Monteith.
Thank you, and through the chair, and I'd just like to follow up on Director Gettins here, and what I've found in my other line of work recently is that I've had a lot of inquiries from people who are just saying, where do we stand?
where they're operating vacation rentals in areas both opted in and opted out. And for a lot of them, I'm saying, well, I can't tell you, I don't know where you stand right now. And I think that we need to, as a board, we need to make a decision as to how we're going to move forward in it, you know, and so that there is some definition as to the where this board is going, where the regional district can go, certainly for the short terms, even just for this year, so that there's some clarity for the operators out there and for the people maybe looking to get into the business. And so I don't think we're going to get that done too quickly if we're relying on a lengthy review or even any kind of review. I'm kind of in the camp of we've got a lot of information. I think we have enough information to form a policy in the very near future, and I think that if we can, as a board, if we can give the staff the direction to form a policy that works for now, and that policy can certainly change in the future, but you know, I think we need to have some clarity out there for the people and for the operators, just to be fair to them, because right now there's a lot of people in limbo.
Thank you, sir. Good points. Director Monteith, please.
Through the chair, I was just going to support what Director Gettin said. I feel like, as it's been pointed out, we started this survey, this process so long ago. So much has changed. I feel like we need to scrap it. I think we need to focus on where we are now today, divide and conquer. But this is actually, in my opinion, a delay in the process. So I cannot support what's being presented by staff. But I think as directors, I think if we figure out our priorities and how we want to conquer it and approach it, I think that's a more effective way to do this.
Thank you very much. Director Ferdigo, did I see a hand up from you?
Yep, thank you through the chair. So a couple things in there. There is an ETSI grant that is open right now, and I have connected with them. So for any of us who would like to do a deeper dive into the economics of short-term rentals, then we can apply for an ETSI grant that will help us get extra funding so we can hire a contractor to get that going. So if anyone would like to join me in that, then that would be great to get that funding going. So while I appreciate that the three who have opted in feel that, you know, this is said and done, it's not. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot going on. We have, and as Director Taylor mentioned, we haven't looked at our processes and we haven't looked at short-term rentals in a very long time. And we need to be looking at how we can strengthen the permitting process. We need to look at, you know, the TUP process. Does that make sense? Does it not make sense? We have a vacation rental enforcement policy review that also needs to be looked at. Like, if the three who have opted in don't feel like this pertains to them anymore, then don't engage. But for the 6 that haven't, or the rest of us that haven't, this is important, and this is what we need for our communities. So from a regional approach, it would be great to see this as that, in that at least 2 of our other areas that are larger, who are dealing with a significant amount of these, that are, we have to look at our current bylaws and our current policies. They have to be updated and they have to be changed. And so just take into consideration that those that didn't just opt in do need to look at these, and that it needs to be done.
Thank you. Director Coyne Jr., please.
Yeah, I agree with that, but Penticton has a really good program, and I don't say that every day, but hey, Penticton. But they have a really good business license program for their short-term rentals, and they've done a lot of work on it, and it's progressed over the years. And I think we're reinventing the wheel here every single time. Why can't we look at what some of our member municipalities that are already doing this? Why can't we look at what they're doing, and even if it's just a short term, bring some of that into policy so that we can do this, and then. Area H and Naramata both want to see this happen, so let's figure out a way that they can make it happen. And if, the others want to join in, then let's let them join in. And I think we need to do what they need to see done. And I think we also need to look at some stronger regulatory. The thing I'm hearing is not that people are upset about short-term rentals. What they're upset about is the lack of enforcement on our TUP system because it's all reactionary. So we need to strengthen our enforcement. And that's, I think, the biggest frustration for a lot of people that I've been talking to. It's not the system, it's the fact that we're not enforcing the system.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for our panels or comments for our panel? Director Coyne Senior, please. And then Director Monteith.
Yeah, the question I have is the permitting process. I don't know if this is for Jim or for Chris, but do we have any kind of timeline on when we would know what it would actually cost to implement such a program if we were to do so? And so then we can go from there as to what fees we would want to charge and where those fees would go. Thank you.
It looks like a CAO Zafino.
Staff's in the process right now of establishing what the costs. Right now, we're looking at 2 different cost recommendation, one for the 3 that opted in and 6 different one for the other 6. We do have the license now for the business licensing program. I've actually connected with the CAO for Penticton to take a look at their short-term rental costs so that we have some compatibility. This was as recent as yesterday. So he committed for me to get it this week. So there will be something coming at the time that we have what I discussed is the business license workshop. At that point, you will get some recommendations. And I don't anticipate all the 6 that opted out having the same cost. You each can have your own depending on what the needs.
Thank you, sir. Director Monteith, then Director Gettins. And Director Taylor. Director Monteith, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'll pass for a sec.
Okay, Director Gettins, please.
Thank you through the chair. Just a comment on Penticton's approach. I also think we have to remember how many bylaw officers Penticton has compared to the regional district and the difference between managing a smaller area compared to the regional district. So I would need to be convinced to take an enforcement or an active enforcement approach. But I am going to make a motion to drop this review as it's presented today. And if I can get a seconder, I'll just explain why I'm making that motion.
I see a couple of seconders for that. So any discussion on that particular matter?
Thank you. So if I could just follow up really quick, Chair, and then I'll just leave it to the table. In light of this business license workshop, I think we need to reformat this request of staff. It is, as Director Taylor said, a couple and a half years old. So I think we need to relook at this in light of it. I have no doubt that staff are going to need extra support to manage what the province has brought down and to how to make this work for 9 areas. But as this is now trying to rebuild this to make this work, I think it'd be just quicker and more easier and more direct to just rebuild a new one after the business license workshop.
Do I have a comment from staff on that? No, no comment. Director Taylor, I did see your hand up.
No, I'll actually, now that we've got this motion on the floor, I'll leave it there. I support the motion.
Okay, Director Coyne Senior, please.
Well, I bet you all know what I think about that. But anyways, I've been promising my constituents out here that have been very involved in this process that we would be having this review. I did that as late as Saturday afternoon. There is no way that I would support dropping this. I don't think that walking away from it after we've promised our constituents that we would look at this. And I just think that that is just absolutely the wrong way to go on this. We need to know more information about how many are there. We need to, through this, we need to figure out a way to be able to have restrictions in certain areas more so than others. This is just really needs to be looked at and to stop now in midstream, I will not support that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments before I call a question? Director Taylor, is that your hand? Yep.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to come back to Director Coyne's comments. Where I was actually going to go with this motion was that we initiate and communicate on a vacation rental or revised vacation rental regulatory policy that addresses the areas that have opted in and the areas that have chosen to stay out. I still think we need to do that. And I think that addresses what the stay-in folks are, or stay-out folks are looking for. But maybe we could talk about, I see that as an outcome of this business license workshop. And so that's why I'm just taking it in a stepped process. Right now, we're just stopping this process. We're going to have a discussion fairly soon, very soon, on business licenses. And I would think coming out of that, we're going to have a more clear idea of the direction we're going, which I think is what Bob wants now. But I'm just saying, if you can wait a little bit, I think we'll have that direction shortly.
Thank you, Director Gettens, and then Director Monteith.
Thank you. And I hear you, Director Coyne. I know that's a promise for your citizens. I just think what we have right now is too dated because we've got the legislation from the province. We now have the ability for RDOS to have licenses. I do think that we do need to support you in Area E in whatever it is and how that looks. I'm okay with that. I think rebuilding this original proposal is too challenging because we still don't have direction for staff on what to study. But if we do this business license workshop, we all get a little bit of learning, including our staff, then we'll know where we need this support. So I don't mean at all to insinuate this is dead out of the water. I know it's too important for many areas, but I can't figure out how to rebuild this proposal for staff. So that was just my only comment.
Thank you. Director Monteith, please.
Thank you. Director Getton said pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I also wanted to add that my residents already pay a lot for bylaw enforcement, and putting that now to a going from reactive to proactive, I think would tax our taxpayers more than they're willing to pay. That's why I opted in, is they want the provincial support. So yeah, I just want to share that right now the TUP process is not working for my community because it puts neighbor against neighbor, and moving to the provincial system allows that outside entity to kind of work towards enforcement.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before I call the question that's on the floor? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor to abandon the review as it stands. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? And we'll need a count on this. So myself, Director Coyne, Director Watt, Director Fedrigo, Director Coyne Jr., and Director, I'm struggling, and you're right there in front of me, having a senior's moment.
Director Graham.
Director Graham, thank you very much. My apologies.
And Roberts. And Roberts.
And Director Roberts. Ms. Malden, how is our count there?
The motion passes.
Motion passes. With that being said, where do we go from here now? Director Monteith.
Through the chair, I guess I'm looking for a timeline or how the workshop is going to unfold. Are we having somebody come in to support staff with that? When is that workshop going to happen? I'm worried about timeline and making sure that it is a priority.
Thank you. Staff?
So yes, this is a priority. A lot of the issues that you've discussed should be resolved in the workshop. Business licenses is new to this regional district. It's not new to a lot of your finance staff. That we have a lot of experience in that. My goal would be the first meeting in May to come in there so that we're doing the proper job. There's a lot of decisions that you're going to have to make in regards to bylaw. The three of you that opted in, the bylaw responsibility is on the province side, not us. And that's why you'll see a lower cost recommendation for the business licenses for those. The cost should be break even where the taxpayer shouldn't be subsidizing for the STR. That's what you're going to get. So you will be having something. It's important that we do it right. And we're starting with STR first and then asking the question, do you want to follow through with the rest of the business licenses in your area?
Thank you, sir. Any other Your comments at this point. Director Coyne Senior, please.
So we're going to walk away from the table with nothing today, nothing on the floor. So we can just, if it falls off the table, it falls off the table. Or are we going to put a motion on the floor today so that we can keep this moving forward? Because I think if we don't do something today, then planning has no direction to do anything. So then planning has to wait until we have our meeting and miraculously come up with some sort of a decision in May, which may or may not happen. So if Director Taylor would, he put it quite eloquently there of what a possible motion could be in lieu of the one that just got defeated. Would he be willing to put that motion back on the floor? I don't know the wording that he did use, but it sounded pretty decent. So anyway, thank you.
Very good, sir. Director Taylor, would you care to rebut that? A deer in the headlights.
No deers here. Bob, or Director Coyne, I'm telling you where I feel we need to go. I feel we need to have this workshop first. My feeling coming from that workshop is that, and I would say this now, but I would like to wait until we have the benefit of the workshop, that we would then initiate and communicate on a revised vacation rental regulatory policy, addressing both opt-in and stay out. But as I said, I'd like to leave that until I don't want to make another motion now until after we've had that more detailed discussion.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment? Oh, Director Roberts, please.
It's starting to look on, especially in regards to topics like this one, that we need to start looking at some of these issues more sub-regionally. The Similkameen seems to be, a standalone in regards to some of the issues. We also look at the reality of costs, prohibitive costs and enforcements in a wide open, very rural area, which is quite challenging, to have the amount of enforcement officers and distances we'd have to need and how that would be done. And it may end up looking a lot different on our side of the map as it is on the Okanagan side. So I think it's just something we got to start thinking about.
Thank you, sir. Any other, Director Coyne Senior, please.
So I guess this one is for Jim. Now that this motion has been defeated, or the plan's gone away. So where do we fall? What's going to be the procedure now that this vacation rental review is off the board? Does that get taken off the Gantt chart, and now we have to wait until there's time again to go back? I mean, we've waited over 2 years for planning to get time to work on this. They finally get the time to work on it. Now it's been defeated at the board. We're not going to do that anymore. So do we have to wait another 2.5 years to get back on the list, or can we put a placeholder in there for this?
CEO Citino, please.
Thank you. So the board can put it back on any time. It doesn't have to be 2 years. However, the board may want to look at some issues that come out of the business license workshop, because there will be some major decisions that have to be made. And I believe at that time, you're going to be correcting some of the controls that the government has created on us.
Thank you, sir. Director Gettens, please.
So, just to Director Coynes, I can hear their frustration and the concern that you have, especially after waiting 2.5 years. So, I'm happy to put forward a motion that this doesn't get moved off the Gantt chart. It is a placeholder until we have more information, which is going to come the first meeting of May. And then from that meeting, we will go back to figuring out what kind of request for proposal we need to do. I'm with you, Director Coyne. This isn't something that I'm willing to wait another 2.5 years to get back to. The point was, it's just that what we had in front of us was so dated, we couldn't make it accurate and reflective of the new information that we have right now. So don't fill up the Gantt chart. I think that the board is very clear on that. This space is held to get this work done because we need to have it done, even for those that opted in, because we have deadlines as well.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this motion? Director Coyne Senior, please. Any comments on this motion? Director Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just repeat the motion for me?
The motion is to keep the project on the Gantt chart and set a timetable for it coming back to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments on this motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of keeping this on the Gantt chart?
No, the question.
Any opposed? Only one. Director Miller opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Any other business arising from this discussion? No, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Private utilities. CAO Zafino, would you please enlighten us here?
Thank you. So this report talks about seeking direction related to proposed amendments contemplating the regulation of private water and sewer utilities, and the recommended motion is that the following amendment bylaws to regulate the creation of new private utilities proceed to consideration of first reading at a forthcoming board meeting with the official community plan amendment bylaw 3045, zoning amendment bylaw 3046, subdivision servicing and development bylaw 2900.01, and development procedures amendment bylaw 2534. Staff is here to answer any questions. Is there a presentation? And with the presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Garish, carry on with your presentation.
Sure, thank you. So a lot of these slides we presented last time, but because of the time lapse, we'll just go over them. So just a refresher for the board in terms of background and how we got here. So you can see that, I think it actually starts a little bit earlier than this when we had the Cleveland zone review request come in, but in terms of fitting it all on one slide, we started with the P&D committee from October of last year, where we put these questions before the board. We got direction, we did our agency referrals. You can see the rest of the dot points here are pretty standard steps that we take in relation to engaging with the public and agencies who might have an interest in various amendment bylaws. And that wrapped up in January, and now we're here before you today with seeking direction for potential first reading, as the CAO indicated. So again, some background, and as I just mentioned, I think the origin for this particular project being before you today came out of the Cleveland sewer project, and as the board knows, Cleveland is currently, although this is subject to review, a rural growth area under the RGS, and that there were existing OCP policy statements that supported the extension of a sewer to Cleveland. The board initiated the extension project, which was resolved by a referendum which was defeated in 2001. Now, following the defeat of that referendum, we received in quick succession 4 separate subdivision applications, all of which proposed the creation of strata sewer systems in order to facilitate the development of lots below 1 hectare. And we can presume that these property owners were probably waiting for the sewer extension to occur. And then when that was defeated, the individual strata system proposals came forward. That raised some concern within the community, and it filtered up into the Advisory Planning Commission, which put forward a recommendation to the board that it undertake a review of strata bylaws, and that this be done in 2023. And of course, the APC's particular concern, as you can see here in the resolution, was for properties that weren't serviced by sewer. Now, there is no Bearland Strata bylaw to review per se, but in responding to that APC resolution, we put to the board that what we felt at the staff level they were really getting at and maybe better accommodated their concerns would be a zone review in Kaleden, but that we would look into the ability to prohibit private utilities, do some work on that, and then come back to the board, and that be considered as a 2023 project. Some more background context kind of informing this, and I apologize if I'm skipping around here a bit, but the Kaleden issue wasn't the first time, obviously, that the board has dealt with private utilities. We have the Greta Ranch rural growth area and electoral area F, and it speaks to how that area will be developed with servicing. There's a liquid waste management plan that was completed in 2009. It provides more direction in regards to that, specifically stating that the Greta Ranch area will be connected to Summerland's sewer system. While that liquid waste management plan is in place, that option has not yet been acted upon by the board. More recently, there was that development proposal for the property between Greta Ranch and the provincial campground. There was a question as to how that was going to be serviced. Would it be on-site servicing, or would there be a connection to Summerland? We understood as part of that discussion at the board table that Summerland may no longer be prepared to extend a connection from its sewer system to Greta Ranch, which then raises the question, given the density that exists at this location, well, how can this be realized if there's no community connection? Is the board prepared to support a private system? And at the moment, there's nothing prohibiting the development of a private system. Again, more background context. This has also percolated up the private utility question in relation to OBWB and their grant funding policy. I think I conveyed to the board last year that OBWB did a survey of local governments in the valley to determine compliance with their 1 hectare policy. And the RDOS was deemed to be somewhat compliant, which was a bit of a surprise to us, given the work that we'd done to update all of our bylaws. And when we queried them with them why we weren't deemed compliant, like the other 2 RDs, it was because of our definition of community sewer and its allowance for private systems. And in conveying that to us, OBWB did point out that there are existing policy statements that speak to the RDOS not supporting private systems, but there's no regulatory support for those at this time. And so the examples I have here on this slide is that we do have the RGS bylaw, which speaks to discouraging the establishment of private utilities. And then these are some typical policy statements that I think are found in most of the electoral area OCPs, so discouraging private water and sewer systems, and also discouraging new systems for sewer. As recently as the workshop last week, I gave the board examples of how these policies filter down into regulations. So we have the existing policies, but we don't have the regulations and zoning bylaw or the subdivision servicing bylaw to support that. Zoning is silent on this, whereas the definition in the subdivision servicing bylaw specifically allows for private utilities, contrary to the policy directions contained in the other documents. Again, I'm sorry, I'm going over a lot of background here, but I also just wanted to flag, which we flagged last fall as well, that there is the water and sewer utility acquisition policy. And, the board's approach in regards to that policy is that utilities are important and they should be run by local governments. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know we're running out of time, but, the board has been asked on occasion to deal with situations where private utilities have failed. And of course, that's not, I think, enjoyable for anybody involved in those situations. And so with the regulation of private utilities, the board has an opportunity to get out in front, potentially, of those kind of situations where before a utility fails, you have an opportunity to say whether it should be local government run or not. When we were putting options to the board in relation to the Kaleden zone review, we said that we would look into researching our ability to regulate private utilities, and so this slide speaks to that. We've been advised that there is authority under the Local Government Act that allows us to potentially introduce those regulations into subdivision and zoning bylaws to prohibit, obviously, private utilities. In terms of overall rationale, staff do feel that there is a strong level of support or reasoning for the board to get into this. We've prepared the draft amendment bylaws that we think would allow for us to regulate these. Principal changes are primarily in relation to the definition of community water and community sewer. And we feel that if we take this approach with the regulations of private utilities, the Culleton zone review would no longer be necessary and could fall off the table. And in terms of a project, obviously there's issues around taking this new approach. Any proposals to create or expand private utilities in future would require board approval. We sought clarification on what approval that would have to be. We think fortunately it came back as a development variance permit, which is $400 and takes about 6 to 8 weeks for resolution. So in the context of a typical development that would require the development of a new utility, that's not an onerous step, we feel. We do recognize, however, that if we get into regulating private utilities, this is likely to create pressure on the regional district to assume ownership of new systems. We suspect that in some cases that's not going to be a burden, but in other situations it may be, particularly if you think to some of those small stratas in Culleton, there's probably not a financial or other rationale for us to take on a 9 or 4 lot system for managing going into the future. So recognizing that, we feel that there's criteria that would likely need to be established. We've taken a stab at that with some of the policies and development procedure amendments that are before you today. And I'm just going to go through some examples where we think this might come into play, and then I'm going to pass it over to Ben to run through the amendments. So again, this is a slide that we used last October, and that we've put here the Greta Ranch rural growth area on the left, and I believe it's Paradise Ranch, which is the other one in Naramata on the right, where there's existing medium density zoning already in place. So these are based on previous board decisions. But obviously, because they're medium density, they're going to require some form of community water or community sewer in order to be realized. And with the regulation of private utilities, this would give the board an opportunity to say whether it's comfortable with these being private, or if they feel there's a role for the regional district to be playing in operating these. Whoops, sorry, I skipped ahead too soon. This is another property that's come up in a couple of different discussions previously, and I've never had a slide to show where it is. But it's about a 22.5 hectare parcel between Culleton and OK Falls on the east side of the highway. We don't know where the zoning came from, but it appears to have resulted from a bylaw review in the late 90s. Contemplates about 500 mobile homes on this parcel, not in a growth area, not close to the Culleton or OK Falls, not quite clear how it could be serviced other than through a private utility. So again, with the regulation of private utilities, this would give the board an opportunity to say, like, for development of this size, 500 potential units, is this something that the regional district wants to operate and maintain going forward, or if it's comfortable through a variance permit, it could allow for a private operator to do so. So another example here. So this is a situation slightly different. These are 2 parcels within the OK Falls primary growth area, the town site. But have not yet been included within the water service area. We have active proposals or queries on both of these parcels. The one to the north is an existing mobile home park that I believe is under order from IHA to improve their water system. They've made inquiries with us about connecting to the water system, but are also investigating upgrades to their own private system, just trying to determine which one's more cost efficient. From staff's perspective, the ability to regulate private utilities in this situation would allow us to ensure that this property is brought into the OK Falls water sewer service area. And the same logic applies to the parcel at the south, which is out, whether it's redeveloped or subdivided. The private utility regulation would ensure that it's connected to the regional district system as opposed to creating its own private system within a primary growth area and potentially an incorporated municipality if that's the way OK Falls goes. A couple of other different types of examples now, and I wanted to use these to just flag for the board that we do have past experience with developers proposing to create infrastructure and then immediately turn it over to us as a regional district to operate. So the first example is Twin Lakes, and my understanding is that certainly in the previous OCP and also in the current OCP, there were existing policy statements encouraging infrastructure to be put in to facilitate the density at Twin Lakes that was contemplated through zoning, and that this be turned over to the regional district so that we could potentially expand the service area and capture more properties beyond the golf course in future. Although this particular development did receive rezoning approval, I believe in 2018 or 2019, it hasn't actually been developed yet, but it's clearly understood by the developer, and I think there's a works and servicing agreement in place that in order for them to do that development, they have to put in the treatment plant and the water system, but as soon as it's constructed, it'll be turned over to the regional district to operate, and it'll become our infrastructure, and we will maintain it going forward into the future. And the next example is actually one where this did occur. The infrastructure has been constructed. So this is the Benchlands development in Naramata. And you can see some examples here. Because of the elevation that the subdivision was going in at, the existing water reservoir wasn't going to be sufficient to provide flows to the proposed parcel. So a new reservoir and pipe had to go in further up, which I can't, you can see here in the aerial at right, it's the bare patch up at the top above the subdivision. Anyways, the point is that in this situation as well, the developer constructed the infrastructure and then has basically, or is in the process, if it hasn't happened already, turned it over to the regional district, and it becomes part of our Naramata water system. So this isn't new terrain for us, if you will, in terms of having developers construct infrastructure, which we then take over. The final example I want to use too, which I think is another area or way in which regulating private utilities would be beneficial, is when the board is undertaking other strategic planning processes, if you will. So here is an example from Naramata where, as we all know with the recent discussion around the area EOCP, Naramata is a designated rural growth area under the RGS. The OCP has established the growth area boundaries in the community. And then following on from that, we also have the liquid waste management plan ongoing to determine how best now to potentially service the Naramata village area with a sewer system. And so with the option of, or the opportunity to regulate private utilities, the board has the ability then to make sure that no private systems could go forward while we're in the process of determining the most appropriate form of sewer service for the Naramata area, recognizing that potentially some of those systems would be needed or beneficial to maybe a community system for Naramata, but if they're allowed to proceed on their own, they might undermine the viability of that project. So it allows the board to ensure that its strategic priorities are being safeguarded. And with that, I'll pass it over to Ben to run the board if we have time.
I would just want to interrupt. We do have the closed session coming up for the others, so if we could hold it there and have Ben complete this, I'll just ask Director Knodel to recess the meeting for the time being, and we can pick it up
Thank you, sir. Yes,
later, where that is. So
if there's consensus, we'll recess this and come back to it after the general.
Okay, thank you for that. So I will turn the next one over to Director Taylor to chair the Environment and Infrastructure. Please go ahead.
Okay, so first off, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, moved, seconded. I'll take that as consensus to proceed. Next, we have a closed session, and the recommendation is, and I got to read this, that in accordance with sections 91, G, I, K, and 92B of the Community Charter, the board closed the meeting to the public on the basis of a part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following: litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages and that, in the view of council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public, and the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party. So can I think I need a motion to go closed. Made, seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we are in closed.
Just got to give Danny a second to get us in there, and then
Okay, so can we have a motion to adjourn our meeting? Okay, any opposed? Pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bush. We will call the Regional District Okanagan-Smilkameen regular board meeting to order, and we have a proposed agenda in front of us. But if there's anything to be removed from the consent agenda, now's the opportunity to do that. Anybody wanting to take anything off the consent agenda? Not seeing any hands, then a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the consent agenda, corporate issues. Looking for a motion on that. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. There is one item on the development services consent agenda, so motion for that one. Rural doesn't really matter, or is that? No, there is nothing on the consent agenda for development services. That's all it says. I read that wrong. B1, temporary use permit application in electoral area D. So CAO.
Thank you. This application is seeking to renew an existing permit for the operation of a vacation rental use on the subject property through the issuance of a temporary use permit. And the recommended motion is that the temporary use permit 2024.002 TUP to renew an existing permit for the operations of a vacation rental use at 4633 Peach Crescent be approved. Staff's here to answer questions.
Okay, I'll go to Director Taylor.
Okay, I'm going to move the staff recommendation with an additional condition on the TUP, which is that there be signage on the front door or front window indicating where the owner's contact information. I have some comments to make about this, but that's my motion.
Okay, it's seconded.
Seconded, yep.
You want to comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's troubling to see, if you're going to do this, I think you got to make it work with your neighbors. And so when we see concerns being brought forward by the neighbors, that's troubling. If they can't get a hold of you, you got to have your neighbors' phone numbers in your phone so that when they text you, you know who it is, or when they phone you, you know who it is. You've got to be available. It's a privilege, not a right. It does benefit the community, though, that we have these things. So I just hope the operator makes herself available to her neighbors, and we don't see further concerns.
Okay, Director Federico.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Just a couple of questions. Is this a principal residence, and does the owner live on site? And if they don't, it's a 3-year TUP. So what happens once the opt-in portion comes into play? Because then the TUP is null and void.
Staff, can you answer that?
So I'm going to qualify my comments by saying we haven't really had a chance to jump into the vacation rental stuff, but my initial thought is, and I'm taking inspiration or direction from the policy manual that the province has put out, where it encourages local governments to apply regulatory bylaw approaches that are consistent with the provincial opt-in approach, if that's the request and the minister subsequently grants it. If the board goes in a different direction and approves vacation rentals that aren't consistent with that approach, I don't think it makes it invalid. It's just an inconsistent approach to that particular policy direction. So I don't think the permit would be invalid. It would stand.
Okay. Any other discussion on this one? Director Coyne, I see you waving. Go ahead.
I agree with the idea in principle of the name on or the phone number, but I don't agree that it has to be the home owner. I would like to see that be a property manager or owner. due to the fact
Yeah.
that I like that. That was the single thing that came out of the survey that we did a few years ago that was the most popular out in our area, was that number be posted by some, and that number should include, if it's a property manager, somebody within a 20-minute response time. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks for that, Director Taylor. A hand, go ahead.
Yeah, I use the term owner because it's my understanding that the owner is the manager.
Okay, manager or owner.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Any further discussion?
And if I could just add,
Go ahead.
we have such low compliance with this. And so I'm really looking to try to recognize that someone is trying to comply, and in this case, they've
applied and.
Yeah, they've applied and we got through the local community to some degree, and so I'm moving in support.
Okay, Director Monteith?
Through the chair, do we have an example of another vacation property being mandated to post a sign with a phone number for contact?
I don't believe it. Go ahead, Mr. Garish.
Not to post a sign per se, but as part of the permitting process, we do send out a letter to adjacent neighbors, and we ask the applicant to identify or nominate the person who is going to be managing the vacation rental on their behalf and to give us their contact details, and we send that out in a letter. I think it's the usual 100-meter radius.
Okay, follow up.
So, through the chair, I guess I'm concerned about making this the only one that's doing that. So I'm wondering if that's a policy thing that we could look at our vacation rental review, or is that something you're wanting to do standard in your area? And this is like the first of the start of that, or is just the only one? To the director, I guess.
Director Taylor?
I put it forward because the neighbors indicated that they had challenges in making contact. So I saw this as an effective way of dealing with that, and I've seen it used, I've seen reference to it being used in other local governments. So I thought that was worthwhile. I think it may even have been mentioned in the STR policy manual, but I'm not 100% certain on that.
Okay, go ahead, Director Coyne.
I'm just curious if there would be a privacy concern with them having to post their private phone number for the whole world to see as they drive by. That's the only thing
I don't know that answer, but I suspect when you're running a business, it's a different scenario. But Ms. Mulden?
That's correct. So if they're operating a business out of there, that would presumably be a business phone, which generally is made public. A private one is not. However, it would outline it too in the application, or should outline it in the application, that is one of the conditions, is that a telephone number be made available for the public to see.
Okay, fair enough on that. All right, seeing no further discussion, again, this one is a rural vote. Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. B2, an OCP zoning in Area C, CAO.
Thank you. So this is in regards to allowing the subdivision and parcel consolidation with 6886 Highway 97. On January 10th, 2024, a public information meeting was held via WebEx and was not attended by any member of the public. Recommended motion is that the electoral area C official community plan amendment bylaw 2452.24 2024 and the Okanagan Valley zoning amendment bylaw 2800.32 2024 be adopted. Staff's here to answer questions.
Okay, Director Knodel, direction on this one?
I'll make the administrative recommendation.
Okay, moved, seconded, thank you. Discussion? Seeing no hands, again, rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us down to finance. An agri-spirit grant application, CAO.
Thank you. So background on this is that there is an Agri-Spirit Fund grant which is becoming available, and the RDOS Fire Department have various capital requirements that meet the eligibility. The recommended motion is the Regional District of Okanagan Similkameen authorize the Regional District Fire Departments to apply for capital grants from the FCC Agri-Spirit Fund.
Go ahead, Director Weep. You got a question or you're moving it?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, moved, seconded, thank you. Any discussion on this one? Not seeing any hands. This one is corporate vote, so we'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to legislative services, D1, Advantage Hope Municipal Regional District Tax, CAO.
The purpose of this report is to determine the board's continued support for the collection of the municipal tax in electoral area H. And the administrative recommendation is that the board of directors provide a letter of support to Advantage Hope for their renewal application for the province to continue to collect the 2% municipal and regional district tax.
Okay, direction on this one, Director Coyne. I think this is in your area. Oh, you're muted. Couldn't. It didn't. There you are.
I'd like to make the administrative recommendation, please.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on it? Go ahead, Director Coyne Jr.
I do have a question. If for some magical way we actually be able to get an MRDT in the Smoke Main, would we be able to then request them to be transferred over to us? There is a way? Okay.
Absolutely. In the absence right now of any of that, that goes to Hope.
Okay.
So yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further on this? Seeing no hands, again, corporate. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Security issuing bylaws, CAO.
Thank you. As I mentioned, it is a security issuing bylaw. This is actually what is required for us to finally get the funds for the fire department vehicle trucks that were purchased in Armada. The recommended motion is that the bylaw 3067 being a security issuing bylaw for the purpose of borrowing funds for the purchase of 2 fire trucks for the Armada department and capital upgrades to the Oliver and District Arena be read a first and second time. On the Oliver one, that is the 400,000 that the board approved for a capital project. And this, they haven't used the funds yet, but they will be. So we're asking for it now.
Okay. Direction on this one? Someone prepared to move it? Moved. Thank you. Seconder. Great. Discussion? Not seeing any hands. Again, a corporate vote. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to D3, an alternate appointment for the ETSI-BC. CAO.
Thank you. As stated, this is to appoint an alternate as outlined in Section 1B of the Economic Trust of the Southern Interior Thompson Okanagan Regional Advisory Committee. Terms of reference, and the recommended motion is that the Board of Directors appoint a member of the board as an alternate to the Economic Trust of the Southern Interior Regional Advisory Committee.
Okay. If memory serves me right, we had a pull out of a hat with 4 people and 3 were successful and 1 wasn't. Would that extra one want to be the alternate? He's looking the other way, so maybe that's. Go ahead, Director Holmes.
When are the meetings? What day of the week?
Gosh, maybe one of the people sitting on that can explain that. Go ahead, Director McCordoff.
Thank you very much. I think it's twice a year that you meet. I am a director on ETSI-BC, so I meet 4 times a year, but the Thompson Okanagan RAC meets twice a year, usually in June and in November. And it has been on a Friday afternoon. It takes about an hour and a half. And we cannot deal with things if we don't have a quorum. And that's why we need to have an extra person on the
Okay.
Thanks.
And that would only be when somebody of the 3 can't make it, so.
Well, given that I'm sure the 3 that we have always make those meetings, so I'll put my name forward.
Okay. So unless there's somebody else who's just dying to take on that alternate role, we'll move that Director Holmes be the alternate. Moved and seconded, thank you. We'll call the question, all in favor? Thank you, any opposed? Motion carries. CAO reports. Go ahead.
Just that last week, the chair and I were in Victoria for the CAO chair conference. And one of the two areas that I thought I was very proud of is that the provincial government recognized this regional district for having an award-winning water policy for purchasing for irrigation.
Acquisitions, yes.
Acquisitions, and I was very proud of that. Also, in discussion with senior ministry staff, we were talking about a regional EOC and how we're looking at an MOU here. And right now we are looking at it in cooperation with the 6 CAOs. And I will be including the 4 Indigenous areas also. They were very interested in that, and they've asked for once this board has approved the terms of reference that would require the establishment of a regional EOC, they would like to see it because they're actually looking at the possibility of enforcing a provincial-wide one.
Okay, thanks for that. Moving on, the chair's report. CAO kind of filled it in there, but I would add there was a couple of other items that were discussed, and it had to do mostly with the Emergency Programs Act and the changes there. And there's a desire for creating a potential working group on that. So at some point, we may be coming back for someone to maybe sit on that from the board. So keep that in mind. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, it might be of interest. I've got a couple other notes I made here. We dealt with a whole lot of items. It was a fairly jam-packed agenda. I think the other one I'll mention at the moment, and I was going to put something together in writing that I'll actually give to Christy to post on our next meetings e-scribe thing so that it's available for those that want to read it. Where was the last one? Oh, it was to do with the adjustments or the province, or there's a request for the province to give regional districts the same authorities that municipalities have. And there was a presentation from the Assistant Deputy Tara Fedrigo, or gosh, I always mix her name up. Yeah, Faganello, that's it. And the request is if there's something specific that the regional districts want that they don't have now, we need to let them know specifically that, and they're not prepared to make that entire change, like just put us under the same act that the Municipalities Act. But if there's something specific that we want to see changed, let them know, and it's got to be done pretty soon before the actual election starts, or it will be too late. Or they say they go into protection mode or something like that, and nothing happens until after the election. So that's the last one I'll mention for now. Director's motions. I did see somebody had one of those. Director Fedrigo.
Thank you to the chair. So this one came out of conversation from today. So also, if we can deal with it today, because it regards to a deadline that's coming up next week. So that the RDOS applied to the ETC-BC Building Economic Development Capacity with a deadline of next Friday, April 12th, for Area E and Area H, and any other area that would like to join in, on an STR economic impact study that will explore STRs as an industry sector, as well as look at the impact on the local economies, which would include tourism, traditional accommodations, workforce development, housing, employees, and entrepreneurs.
Okay, so that's what you would like to see, but you need to make a motion to deal with that today.
Yes.
So you're moving to deal with it. Seconded. It's on the floor. Any discussion on that? Seeing no hands, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. And then the actual motion, you're moving it?
Yes.
Is there seconded? Thank you. Do you want to hear that read out once more, just for?
Not a chance. For me, anyways. I don't have it.
Okay, well, go ahead, Director Fedrigo. I think she emailed it.
Email.
Yeah, it might be caught up somewhere.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Director Federico.
That the RDOS apply to the ETSI-BC Building Economic Development Capacity with a deadline of April 12th for Area E and Area H to embark on a short-term rental economic impact study that will explore short-term rentals as an industry sector, as well as look at the impact on local economies, including tourism, traditional accommodations, workforce development, housing employees, and entrepreneurs.
Okay, and that would include any other areas that
Yep.
wanted to step
Now's
into
the
it?
time.
Okay, Director Gettens, question?
Thank you. Through the chair, who at the RDOS puts together the application? Which staff person puts together the application?
That would be a question. I'd have to go to the CAO. Who might be able to do that, or how would that proceed?
It'd be the legislative services to my right.
Oh, delegating.
Yes.
Okay. Anything further? I've got over here first, and then Director Taylor. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. If we were awarded this grant funding, I guess, how is this being implemented by, is it like staff that are going to be implementing this economic impact, or are we doing a contractor that comes in to look at that impact on those areas for?
I suspect it would be through a contract, is my suspicion. Go ahead, CAO.
The capacity box is full, and the Gantt chart pretty well states that. It's 288 projects, so it would have to be added onto the Gantt chart with a contractor doing the work.
Okay, go ahead. First, Director Taylor, and then Director Gettens.
Yeah, just a quick question to the Director Federico as to the total value, and then I have a comment. Total value of the amount of funding that you're hoping to get out of this?
We can apply for up to 20,000.
Okay.
Okay. I guess I'd just push back a little bit on legislative services being able to write the app, because from my perspective, yeah, it might be headed up through there, but it's going to need a lot of time, I would think, input from planning and development. And I'm not sure they got it, but.
Time, you're meaning, yes. Director Gettens, and then Director Coyne. Oh, okay. You got that, Director Coyne, and then Federico.
I'm sure the director could help with the application. She's more than capable and has written them in the past and got many of them, and I'm sure Christy would enjoy the help.
Could use. Okay, Director Federico.
Thank you through the chair. That's going to be my comment. I can assist with this, as well as the points that are needed for hiring a contractor that would look at it. I have one in the process for Area E already, so I'm happy to help.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I guess like my one concern with this is $20,000, and if it's half an hour is $5,000. That's not a lot of money. That's going to go very far to give you a very good, what do you call it, impact study for each area. If you're going to ask a consultant to come in for $20,000 for how many, like two, that's $10,000 right there for a half the day consultation.
Always can use more money, that's for sure. But Director Federico?
Thank you through the chair. There's contractors out there that will do that for that. Plus, then the other areas that want to be involved can add additional funding from their rural projects budget or other grant funding that's available. So there's ways that can be enhanced if more is needed.
Okay. Seeing no more hands. Oh, Director Gettens, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think following up a little bit with Director Taylor, it's hard for me to hear that a director is going to do staff work. I find that a real struggle because we're always told that's too operational. And then you're like, no, it's not. I'm going to do it. And like, I find that hard. And no doubt there's capability. And I know that this is something that Director Federico is very skilled in. But I struggle with a director doing an application and where that lands and where the line is. And so I just had to share that comment. I don't know that elected officials should be writing grants on behalf of local governments. I don't know if that happens in the municipalities, but I think it's a bit of a struggle. So.
Yeah, that may depend on your municipality, but at this stage it is the Legislative Services Department that would write it. If they ask her for help, that's their call.
But I don't think we have rooms. What I'm hearing is the Gantt chart is full. That's what I'm hearing.
Unless, go ahead, CEO.
The reason that Gantt chart was created is we would take a look at this project and then take a look at if we can fit it in, great. If we can't, we'd have to take a look and come back on board and say, okay, this is what's gonna, how it's gonna affect it. When I said legislative services, they'd be taking the lead because somebody needs to control, making sure that it goes through the process. As far as writing grants, you're right, it's operational, and there's a complete divide between operational and political.
Okay. Did I see a hand, Director Monteith?
Yeah, through the chair, I guess I'm also curious too, how much planning is going to be involved in it? Because I guess making sure we get the information that's applicable to what we're doing moving forward, which we really don't even know yet. So I guess I'm confused about who's sort of overseeing the project.
Overseeing, go ahead, Director Holmes.
So in Summerland, and I imagine many small municipalities, where we don't have a lot of capacity, generally the rule, yeah, this is a staff function for sure. That's kind of the principle. But there are times when a councillor will, if they have a certain expertise or specialty in a certain area, they'll, and a project that's important to them, then they'll step in and do something that might be considered operational. And in this case, I would say if Director Federico is willing and can put an application together, it's not a huge project that we're applying for massive government funding for, let her do it. You know, like, what's the big deal? That's the way I kind of look at it. And I think it could be, you know, nothing bad can come from it, and I don't think it should take too much time from staff. So that's just my feeling.
Okay, thank you. Director Coyne.
And it is an ETSI grant. I mean, the motion is just about the entire grant application. It's like what, a page and a half, 2 pages tops. I mean, they're very high level. It's what do you want to do? What do you want to spend money on? And that's pretty much it. So I mean, they're not complicated grants, and it's 20,000 fully funded. And if you don't spend the money, you got to give it back in a couple of years. So it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, well, not seeing any more hands, we'll call the question. Oh, did I miss one? Sorry, Director McCordoff, go ahead. And
Thank
Director
you very
Coyne.
much. There is a deadline for this. It has to be in, I believe, by the 14th of April. And this is the spring intake. If for some reason it doesn't get in before the 14th of April, it can be done again in the fall. And there is more money being allocated for these grants as we get money from interest in the investments. So that's a good thing. So I think in order to get it done by next Friday, I think Director Federico needs to go ahead with how she knows how to do it. Otherwise, it can wait till the fall, or other people can apply again in the fall because it's twice a year. Thanks.
Okay, Director Coyne Senior.
Yeah, excuse me. I think we're overcomplicating things here. This is a very small grant. It's not going to change the world. It might change some people's look at the way they look at things. It might change how people, we don't even know the real numbers. We think we might know the numbers from something that we've read, or you can go online and look it up, or, well, who the hell knows if most stuff you read online isn't accurate anyways. So if we have the opportunity at no cost to us for the board to do this, let's get at it. I think we're just spinning our wheels here, overcomplicating life. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Just 2, Director Miller and Director, did I miss any others? 2? Oh, gotcha. All right, motion carries. Any other director's motions? Board members' verbal updates. Anything to report from your communities? Oh, go ahead, Director Coyne.
Not from my community, but from Penticton, actually. I came over for Ignite the Arts, and I just have to say kudos to the people of Penticton. They did a great job, and yeah, it was a fun weekend, and way to go, guys.
Yeah. Well done. Anything else to report? Go ahead, Director Holmes.
It's not an update, it's a question, if I could, a general question. We just got an email from the South Okanagan Conservation Fund field trip. Now, I'm just wondering if that could be rescheduled, because they schedule the exact same day as the Silix water forum, which all the mayors and
myself, yeah,
and the chair are involved in. So it's kind of inconvenient for a good lot of us that day, but it looks really interesting. I'd love to be able to attend. So I don't know who set that date and if we would.
So we weren't aware of the Silix water forum, and looked around for any other things that might have been a barrier for the board, but absolutely, we would like as many directors as possible to attend, so we will wiggle that date around. Should we stick with the Thursday opposing board day for trying to organize this? Like, is that generally the better day?
Generally should be, but.
Okay, we'll try to do that. We'll try to do a Thursday that isn't a board day, and go from there.
Okay.
Send a new date out.
All right. Did I see a hand from you, Director Taylor? Go ahead.
Yeah, I did mention it at the session we had last week, but I'd just like to formally note here today that we got our second building funded, and so we're really happy with that. We also really appreciated the opportunity to, not very often Okanagan Falls hosts a meeting for the rest of the South Okanagan and Similkameen, and we did that for their housing societies with the minister and the MLA, so that was kind of cool. You know, we've distributed these 2 assessments for the sewer and water systems. I think that's a real milestone. Great work. I think there's going to be the need for some communication on that, and also on Bill C-35 STRs. So just look to work with staff in that area.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Federico.
Thank you, the chair. Mark April 20th on your calendars, because it's our community garage sale day, and it's always super fun in Naramata on that day.
Busy day for sure. Director Monteith.
April 20th is the wrap up of National Volunteer Week, and with the City of Penticton, we're hosting a free pancake breakfast at Gyro Park for community volunteers. So make sure you come out to that.
Wow. It's going to be a busy time for sure. Anything further as far as verbal updates? Go ahead, Director Coyne, Senior.
Yeah, so spring's coming on.
Hey, guys. Director Coyne, go ahead.
Yeah, it's spring's coming on. It's AGM season out here in all of the little community groups. And I attended the one on Saturday at Hayes Creek. And I got a little bit of an eye opener as far as our communications has gone. I talked a bit about the short-term rental stuff because that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts out this way. And then we talked about the Chain Lake Dam, and I was shocked to find now Osprey Lake is within 5 miles of the dam. And there was probably 3 people in the building that knew that we were looking at replacing the Chain Lake Dam, which will affect everybody's life out there, even though there's only I think it's 68 homes that are actually on the Chain Lake that will be paying for the upgrade to the dam. But it just goes to show that we really need to try and get more of what we talk about at the board table out to the public with these types of projects. I was absolutely shocked that those folks didn't know about it, and I'll wear that hat because I'm the director and I should have been out there more, but I thought there was enough of it on our social media and whatever our pages are. So anyways, I guess the thing I learned this week is you can't really assume that your constituents are knowledgeable about what's really going on in your area, because you have a tendency to end up dealing with a small group of people in each area of your area. I mean, you know, my area is 200 and some odd kilometers across, so it's a long ways in a lot of different communities, and I got a real eye opener as far as how much our constituents actually know about what's going on in our area. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Yeah, sometimes we forget that not everybody keeps up to speed on that sort of stuff, for sure. So, not seeing any other hands. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Ooh, they're quick. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. I think we've got enough time for Director Knodel to reconvene the planning and development. Go ahead.
Thank you. We were on the private utilities discussion. I'm not quite sure where we were sitting on that, so I believe that we still have some
It's in the middle of that presentation.
Yes. Are presenters available?
They're sitting there ready to go at your word.
Have at her.
Okay, so Chris left it for me to take over. When we brought this project to the Planning and Development Committee back in October, we promised that we would return with copies of the draft bylaws. So over the next couple slides, I'm just going to go through a few of the specifics of those draft bylaws before moving on to a brief overview of the recommendations that are in the report. So there's 4 bylaw amendments that are being proposed. The first set of amendments are to each of the electoral area official community plans. They, in general, have similar language that speaks to discouraging private utilities currently. And so the next couple slides on the OCP amendments will be similar in nature. So what's proposed is adding new infrastructure and servicing objectives that would discourage development of private systems for provision of water and sewer services. And then to go along with that, there would be new infrastructure and servicing policies that would specifically not support creation of new private community water or sewer utilities.
And I'll just jump in quickly. I just want to emphasize that I think the main purpose here is just to get consistent wording across the OCPs, that there are already versions of these policies within the existing ones. This is just to make sure that they're all saying more or less the same thing.
Okay, I'm just going to go on to the next set of amendments. They apply to each of the zoning bylaws. So again, it's going to be similar wording that's proposed. So each of the zoning bylaws are proposed to be amended by adding new definitions for community water and sewer systems. And the Okanagan Valley zoning bylaw would be amended to require new provisions related to minimum parcel size exemptions. And so this new standard wording would specifically exclude strata corporations, private utilities, or business corporations from the definition of a community water and sewer system, effectively prohibiting community systems by those entities.
There's a hand here, Director Knodel, from Director Coyne.
Director Coyne, senior, junior, whichever.
Thanks. So my question is to you guys, like, have you discussed this with the province? Like, because the province is trying to get rid of private utilities, right? Like they're trying to push them out. But have you guys discussed moving this forward with them in some sort of way, like, so that we can kind of all be on the same page here? Because I can see pushback if we do this. I can see pushback coming from developers and the public that this is us making this decision, and there's no requirement under the law for them to, like, that they still have the right to do it under the law except for our bylaws. So have you guys discussed this with ministry staff at all?
Presenter. Not sure who's going to answer that one.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's a no.
Well, no, I mean, sorry, we're just trying to get I was just trying to get a sense of which external agencies we would have sent the amendment referrals to. And because it's an OCP amendment, we do a much broader agency referral than we would if it was just zoning. And I was just trying to confirm, like, normally we would send referrals to IHA. We've tried in the past to send referrals to Ministry of Environment. They usually respond to us saying that they don't respond to referrals anymore, even though, again, based on the volume of the particular sewer system, one is regulated by IHA, one is regulated by Ministry of Environment. But no, I don't think we would have done environment. But I mean, part of the background research when we were tasked with the clean zone review was to research our ability to regulate private utilities. And what came back to us is that we do have legislative authority to do so. And I think Ben might touch on this in a few slides, that as with everything in the zoning bylaws, it's structured as a prohibition, but property owners always have the right to come before the board to have that put aside, either through the issuance of a permit or an amendment to the bylaw. So it's not an absolute prohibition, but it gives you that oversight role at the front end, as opposed to being asked at the back end when the system has failed to come in and take it over, right? So.
Director Monteith, please.
Through the chair, I just want to share with the board that this bylaw is necessary for electoral areas that do not have community sewer, and some don't have community water. But when we have these pocket communities and they're all trying to densify and do their thing, we're having all these micro systems pop up, and the challenge is managing that when they fail, right? So I know of 5 other applications that are coming forward for more subdivisions to do exactly this, where we're going to have all these pocket systems where there's no collaboration or working together. The communities turn down, community sewer. We have a water system that cannot sustain any more development. So I'm struggling with more and more density and having all of these extra pocket systems. So having that control is really important when we have these separate communities, and preventing the disasters that we will get, and they'll all land back on us again at some point anyway. So this is important.
Thank you. Director Coyne Jr., please.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like we're all against all this. What I'm trying to get at is, like, if we were to work with the ministry, whether it's municipal affairs or whoever, because they want to get rid of water districts, right? Like, this is part of the plan long term. That's why they're underfunding them. They're trying to starve everybody out. It would strengthen our position if we were working directly with the ministry and the government to come up with this. I mean, if we're going to be doing this, let's be the leaders in this. Let's do the best job we can do. Let's get them on side. And if we haven't asked them for, a best practices or whatever, that's all I'm asking for, is, like, why aren't we in those discussions with them to change the rules, right? Municipalities already do this. I mean, you want to put in a subdivision, and you got to put in all the servicing, and then we take it over as soon as it's done, right? Like, this is exactly the same thing. None of us are, I don't think any of the municipal people are opposed to this, because that's exactly what we do every single time we do development. I just want to make sure that we are doing the best job we can do. And, we've been recognized for our water acquisition. Like, let's be the best at it, not just, let's just put this together. So that's why I'm asking the questions. It's not saying to you, Director Monteith, that we're not supportive. It's just, let's get this right, and let's do it damn good.
Thank you.
Okay, so before Ben restarts.
Any other questions? Seeing none, as fast as I can scroll through this top bar. Carry on with the presentation, please.
Sure. Just before Ben restarts, I'll say that, I mean, fortunately, we have the benefit of being in committee today. So we're more than happy to reach out to the applicable ministries and explain to them, like, if it is an environment and they don't usually take referrals from us, that maybe in this instance we can have a discussion with them. not in the form of a formal bylaw referral, but just to explain to them what we're doing and see how this aligns with their priorities. And we can certainly come back to the board with, the outcomes of that discussion and let you know what we heard. But with that, I'll pass it over to Ben to continue.
Okay, so moving on to the third set of amendments, I'll go quick on this slide. This, similar to the zoning bylaws, it's proposed to introduce similar definitions for community water and sewer into the servicing bylaw. Again, that would specifically exclude strata corporations, private utilities, or business corporations from the definition of community water or sewer. And the fourth set of amendments apply to the development procedures bylaw. And as Chris mentioned just a moment ago, as with all things land use, there is a formal appeal process for property owners that consider themselves affected. In this case, seeking an exemption to a servicing regulation or a zoning regulation could be in the form of a development variance permit application. And contemplating that we might see, if these amendments are adopted, a large number of these applications, it's proposed to include a requirement for a utility condition assessment from a qualified professional engineer to accompany any variance application that's proposing to vary a water or sewer system regulation. So just going into a few more details on what that utility condition assessment would look like, the proposed amendment specifies that it should include drawings of the proposed system, certification from a professional engineer that the system is equivalent to or exceeds the current standards under the Regional District Servicing Bylaw, or alternatively, the current MMCD guidelines. It would require engineer's assessment that the current condition of the system is in good working order, and that any works are in good working order as well. And then it would also need to include engineer certification that the system has capacity to support the intended development. Before I go into some of the recommendations in the report in front of you, I'm sure that all of you have seen this slide before in many of Chris's presentations, but just as a reminder, when we're dealing with policies that are in the regional growth strategy or the official community plans, these are not in and of themselves regulatory documents. They establish policies and objectives that lay the groundwork for future regulatory bylaws to be implemented. So in this case, that would be the zoning bylaw and the subdivision servicing bylaw. And so the amendments in front of you today are dealing with these two bylaws at the bottom of the slide here, zoning and subdivision servicing, hoping to implement existing policies that are already laid out in the regional growth strategy and the official community plans. So these are the current policies in the RGS and the OCP bylaws. Policy 3A-3 in the RGS specifically encourages publicly operated utilities and discourages the establishment of private utilities and services. And so from a staff perspective, what we struggle with is, if this is being discouraged, in general, the only opportunities for the board to exercise these policies is going to be if a bylaw amendment, either an OCP or zoning bylaw amendment, is in front of the board for their consideration. In all other instances, since the regulatory bylaws do permit private utilities, they are permitted as of right. And so because of that concern, the first alternative, if the board does not wish to proceed with these amendments, recommendation from staff is that the board may wish to consider implementing amendments to the regional growth strategy. And the follow-up steps from that may involve initiating discussions with the member municipalities, and what may flow from that is subsequent amendments to each of the electoral area official community plan bylaws. And the second alternative, while the status quo is an option available to the board, because of these concerns over the consistency between the existing policies and the implementing bylaws, administration does have some concerns that the current status quo may be a bit misleading as to the board's position, and that this may not be an effective means of discouraging private utilities going forward. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the panel? Director Roberts, then Director Federico.
Yes, thank you. I've been kind of rolling this over in my head for quite a bit. Again, wondering what becomes grandfathered in, kind of moving forward, and especially looking at an area like ours that has no zoning. I have 8, let's say 8 water systems with some with sewer for mobile home parks and stratas. I have 3 RV parks that have their own systems, and then 2 improvement districts. Of course, the improvement districts stand on their own. And again, these are things that are the response and in regards to their issues. And I'm wondering, you know, going forward and getting ahead of it without having like doing it in conjunction with the province, are we taking on a larger cost? Like I'm looking at the amount in regards to regulations. Like, is it regulating or is it operating? And what are we opening ourselves up for in regards to overall costs? You know, and I'm looking at an area a little bit smaller than Area H, but again, as vast and distances and many different little systems. And in my particular area, other than a improvement district, which has had questions from its citizens, we haven't had any issues. So anyways, don't know if that's a question, but it's maybe more about cost, and I think maybe that's something that we would find out later, or is that something that, you know, we'd have a little bit of insight in now? Thank you.
Thank you. Director Federico, please.
Thank you, through the chair. One, has this gone to our APCs? Because I know my APC, I think, would like to hear about this. And then from there, right now, kind of struggling with this a little bit because we're in the middle of a liquid waste management plan. And so essentially this, I feel anyway, that kind of pushes us into a public system, which most of our residents have expressed they don't want. And then we still have a bit of growth that's happening in the village. So for me right now, I'm kind of challenged until our liquid waste management plan has been explored more and there's been a bit more consultation with others in our community.
The delegation.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Has it gone to our APCs?
No, it has not gone to the APCs.
Thank you. Any other questions from the panel? Director Monteith, please.
Through the chair, so this came from my APC, and that's sort of kind of what started the whole ball. So, yeah, just want to share that.
Chair, I'd like to make a question, please.
Certainly, Director Bloomfield.
So a couple of questions. One is there any form of scale in this regulation? You know, if you've got, 3 or 4 users that want to set up a private system, does the rule start at anything more than 1? That's one question. The other is, what about developments that are proposed or halfway through or in, phases 1 or 2 or, of 5 or 6 phases? How does it affect those? And will our engineering department, and this is really a question, I think, for obviously Public Works, but do Public Works, do they have the capacity to take on the extra workload? And what I'm thinking is, it's all very well to say that we have to run it, but if we don't have the capacity to take it on straight away, will that in effect form a delay on development proposals?
Thank you. Mr. Garish, you're looking like you're eager to answer that one.
Well, I don't know about eager, but I'll try my best. And I think some of this might, some of my response might speak to the questions that Director Roberts raised. So, I mean, obviously it's hard for us to know what's going to come before the board in the future. But for systems that are existing, they were lawfully established at the time because the RD has no regulations prohibiting. So they're, to use the old word, grandfathered. They enjoy non-conforming use rights going forward. But really what we're anticipating is that when there's proposals that come before you as a board, I mean, they're all going to be different, right? No one is going to look like a previous one, and they're all going to have their own particular circumstances. And we're hopeful with that utility condition assessment that we get some basic information for the board's benefit as to what's the feasibility of this system, and if it's not feasible for the RD to operate it. Are you as a board prepared to allow it to go forward under private operation and have that area that it's servicing, whether it's a subdivision or say a multi-unit structure, bear the costs of that? And so that would inform your decision on whether you grant a variance permit or whether you require it to be turned over to the RDOS to operate, because it does maybe make financial sense. And going back to those slides I had earlier, I mean, I tried to find one where that might make sense. Greta Ranch, questionable. But maybe the one for the 500 units between Cleedon and OK Falls, that's of a sufficient density that it's feasible. We can service it. But certainly when we come to you with a variance request, you'll be getting comments from the various departments as to whether this makes sense and whether we recommend in support of it or not.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for the delegation?
Just a bit of a follow-up there. Can we talk about the capacity of Public Works to take on the extra systems?
As part of the assessment of variance applications, or? Oh.
If I may answer that. So this year the board authorized 4 additional staff members for the utility department, and that was just to keep up with what we are now. With each new service that we get, we will probably be asking more staff to come in. Remember, each service is self-sustaining. It doesn't mean that if we may take off 1, 2, or 3, on the 4th one, we will come back and ask for more staff. So as far as capacity goes, no.
Thank you, sir. Director Coyne Jr.
Just out of curiosity, do we have DCCs in all electoral areas if we're going to take these on?
That would be a director or CAO's appeal, please.
So the answer is no, but we're actually in the process right now of doing a DCC RFP, which will include, I'm requesting DCCs for all of the areas, because right now, I believe Naramata is one of the healthiest ones for DCCs, but we need to have them all. And that would also not just include water, include parks and sewer. And with the new amenities, also fire halls.
Can I follow up on that real quick?
Certainly.
Yeah, so if we don't have those in place, and it takes a couple of years to get DCCs in place, would we not be able to, if we were going to move forward to this, have some sort of deposit or something that we can put down so it can start collecting interest? Because if you put in a Claire Jester, you got like 35 years to 45 years roughly before you're replacing major components. So, these things cost, and then if we're not planning for the cost now, then we need to be able to deal with it, and they're expensive as hell. So
thank you, sir. Director Weeb.
So given that at the committee we're just looking at bringing recommendations that will get to the board, I'd be comfortable to bring the recommendation as presented, recognizing that there's time, that we allow for time, that if there are APCs that want to look at it before it comes to first reading. But I think our policies and our bylaws and our zoning and our those things kind of need to be in sync just for you guys to be able to do your job well. So I recognize I'd be willing to make that recommendation at this level, that maybe we're not quite ready for first reading, but at least we get this ball rolling. And then if it does need to go to, we recognize Clayton's APC wants to see this move forward. But I don't think there's any harm in making this recommendation and then giving time before we get to first reading of the board, if there's somebody else willing to. Yeah.
Director Taylor, are you seconding that as a motion?
Seconded.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. I do have one question for the delegation that I have a number of single lots that are looking at sharing wells. Does that become a service, a utility?
I mean, it might be a better question offline, but my understanding of like whether it's community sewer, community water system, it's anything more than one connection. And I would caution who's ever thinking about doing that, because depending on the volume, I mean, as soon as you create a community system, then you're bound to comply with either IHA or provincial regulations. And it may not just be as simple as allowing your neighbor to pump out of your well, right? So, but we can touch base offline and get some more information on what's happening.
Yeah, I did bring it up because there is already a couple in our area that are done by easement, but so they're obviously it's gotten the attention of small lots that are water challenged. Let's put it that way. Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Seeing none, that brings this to a close. So I think everybody's eager to get out of here. Oh, Director Coyne Jr.
Yeah, I'm moving adjournment.
There's a seconder for Mr. Director Roberts. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, have a fine day, ladies and gentlemen.